for me personally, when I show up on the podium, I know that I've done my homework and I'm secure in that. And I know that I've conducted orchestras before, good ones, not as good ones. Um, and so I have all of these experiences that I can draw on, and that, I can make the rehearsals work, I can make the concert work. And yeah, I know that.
Good morning, William.
Good morning, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. It's so lovely to speak to you again on Zoom.
Likewise.
And you must be in Vienna at the moment with that
I
lovely
am.
background.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, this is it's nice to be back in Wien.
That's great. So because you
Yeah.
travel from America to Vienna and all over Europe to do concerts, isn't that right?
That's right. Yeah.
How do you find this way of doing it? Is it the same type of audiences that you attract, say, in Europe than in America?
Well, I mean, I guess so. I mean, of course, everywhere has different people, but the one common thread between everyone that's going to concerts, it's classical music. And the joy of seeing a classical orchestra on stage, or an opera on the stage as well, or in the pit, the opera orchestra. And it's I've been getting, I guess you could say, about the same type of audience, the classical music lover, and also non-traditional audiences in Vienna. With the Nova Orchestra Wien, it's been one of our main goals to try to reach out to everyone. Yeah, the people who have the abos, the subscription tickets, but then also to people who think, well, maybe the concert hall is not for me. But of course, we say, no, it is for you also, and you should come. And generally, they do enjoy it.
Well, I must say, you've invited me to some of your concerts already here in Wien, and on one occasion I brought my brother with, who is actually not a great, or he doesn't have great interest in classical music, yet he loved the concert. He loved being there. The whole program that you had was for him so wonderful. He still talks about this. So you did something right that evening.
Well, I'm very happy to hear that. That's exactly what we're looking to do. We want to reach out to people who, they for whatever reason, it's many reasons, many different reasons for many different people, think, well, maybe I don't go to the concert hall because I don't like that, or it's not for me, or there are all types of things and that people say or think, and just give it a chance. And it's good music, and it's a good experience, I hope. And so that's what we try to offer, some type of experience that people will enjoy, something unique.
Yeah, I like that approach that you have, that you also want to accommodate people who are not necessarily concert goers.
Yeah.
But now, William, like I said, I've been to some of your concerts, but I'm so intrigued now, and I've never spoken to you about this, but how did your path in music start? What inspired you to firstly become a musician and then also a conductor?
Well, it's actually a very typical path, I guess you could say, for a musician in the States. I'm from the U.S., of course, and I started in the school system. My parents are not musicians. I don't come from a family of musicians, but they do appreciate music, all types of music. And so my mother signed me up to the strings class, and so I was first given the violin, and I said, no, I want to play the bigger one. And then they gave me a cello. At the time, I wanted to play the double bass, but the cello was the biggest one in the room, and so I said, okay, I have the big one now. And I'm very happy for that, because the cello is such a fantastic instrument. And that's how I got started, just playing playing the cello and strings class, and at the same time I signed up for the band, and so I played saxophone in the band, and then I was just always curious about all of the different instruments that are in the orchestra. You listen to I would listen to a recording of Stravinsky's Firebird, and I'd hear this incredible oboe solo and think, well, I want to do that. And then I'd hear the horn and I'd say, well, I want to do that. And I'd hear, different instruments and say, well, I want to do that. And well, I did actually start learning how to play other instruments as well, because I wanted to play many different instruments, because I just thought that it was incredible to hear these different sounds in different places. But of course, one can't do all of them at once. Like physically playing each instrument. And so I was also studying composition and writing pieces here and there. And now we're talking in high school, and cello was still really my main instrument, and I would play other instruments on the side, just to kind of get an inside look into it. And then I was a student at the Interlochen Arts Academy, which is a boarding arts high school in northern Michigan, that has many different arts disciplines. From dance, theater, to motion picture arts or filmmaking, and creative arts such as visual arts and writing, but of course music and all of the facets of music. And so I was playing solo cello in the orchestra one day, and it was for the conducting class. And there was a small group of students who were studying conducting, and I might have laughed a little bit at how some of them were doing it, and continuously messing up. And then the teacher said, "Okay, well, you do it. You get up and you do it."
Oh, okay.
And I made a complete fool of myself. It was so bad. I know that it had to have been bad, because I didn't know at all what I was doing. But he said, "Okay, I'm going to teach you for next semester." This was towards the end of the first semester, and so then starting in the second semester, he started teaching me, and so I started working with him, and we went through Beethoven Symphony Number 1, I remember, and a few other things, and that's how I got into conducting. But in America, it's not like in Europe, where you have a bachelor's in conducting that you can do. There is no bachelor's in conducting in the U.S. Because the thought is that you should first be very good at an instrument, or at composition or music theory or something. And so you major in these other aspects of music, and you get a bachelor's in that. And then you go through a very rigorous audition process to get into a master's of conducting program. And then you do the master's and maybe also an artist diploma or a doctoral degree. And then you move into the profession, of course, doing summer festivals and master classes as well, to augment that education. But for me, I then went to Europe, and I started. I continued studying actually conducting throughout the bachelor's, just not a formal bachelor's in conducting. And then I moved to Europe, and really formally studied it, and went deeper into it. I was doing still cello and conducting in London before moving to Vienna, where I said, okay, I do just conducting.
Amazing. But you also said that you did some composition as well.
Yes. I've been composing since the very beginning, because I was always interested in how music works, and how putting organizing sounds on a page to create something new. And that was always something very interesting for me. And I would, I'm not a pianist. I would never say that I really studied piano, but I did actually, as my first instrument, play the piano very basically. But I would spend hours. I remember sitting at the piano and just coming up with many different things, writing on the piano, and many different voices. And I had an electric piano as a kid, and you could record what you played, and then you could make different tracks. And so I actually would sit there and play, create different symphonies sitting there at the piano.
Amazing.
With changing the different voices from strings to flute and whatnot. But this was when I was really small, and then I started to formally study composition. And then of course, then you're writing on the page everything, And yeah, so actually on the next Nova Orchestra Wien concert, we're doing an early piece of mine. I mean, you could say it's a middle early piece of mine, but it's one of my first orchestral pieces from 2010. And so yeah, I like it, and I hope that audiences also like it. It's not always that I like things that I write.
Oh, okay. Are you very
Yeah.
self-critical?
I think that one has to be, because I want to make sure that I'm honest, and I want, and what I mean by that is what I put forward for people to hear. It's now talking about composing, but it can also be for a conductor or for a musician. What I put forward for people to hear in the concert, I think has to be of the best quality. And when it's not, it's really, it really hurts me personally. I feel really bad, and because I feel like I let the audience down. Or as a conductor, if the concert didn't go well, I feel like I let the musicians and the audience down. But as a composer, I feel like it's just very, very important that what you put on the page and then what you put out into the public is of the top quality possible. Of course, maybe you make some revisions later, but I think that what's offered to the public has to be good from the beginning. And so I try to be critical.
Mm. But as a conductor, do you think it's important that you have this experience in composing?
Yeah,
To
100%. 100%. I think that I think it's important to understand how the orchestra works. There are a lot of conductors who don't have that experience, and I can say from the standpoint of somebody who's played in the orchestra as a cellist, professional orchestras also, that you can tell when somebody doesn't quite know what you're doing, and because they speak to you in a way where it's like, okay, you don't understand how string instruments work, or you don't understand how winds work, or you don't, and as a composer, when you study composition, orchestral composition, orchestration, you learn how these different instruments work and how they function. You learn that you can't just, you learn that you can't just do certain things, and on the page, because it physically is impossible, or very, 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 very difficult for the musician to sit there and do. And so I think it's incredibly important to understand this, because also from there, then you can start to understand the music of other composers, of Beethoven, of Bruckner, of Brahms, of Mahler, of Shostakovich, of Pierre Boulez. So many different. You understand how these composers worked, yeah, as well, because you can then go back and look at their music and do an analysis, a full analysis of their music, and deconstruct it and see how they came to what they did.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then also when you are a composer yourself and your music is being performed, you understand that you can, or at least for me, it's easier for me to understand how composers like Stravinsky may say, okay, I want only what's written on the page to be performed. If it's on the page, I want this to be there. I don't want anything else added to it, to the performance. I don't want you to slow down. I don't want you to speed up. I don't want you to make things shorter or longer or louder or softer than what I put on the page. I understand that. But I can also understand how some composers would also say, well, this is the starting point, and I do want you to add, different, and make it more personalized, add more more thoughts to what has already been written. I can understand both points of view. They're both two extremes, but it just gives you a better insight into the composer, and by having that better insight, I believe that it gives you a better performance on the stage as well, because then you have more information to work with, and you can hopefully share more with the audience, with the public.
Yeah. Well, I've heard this also from a composer who said that when he finishes his work and he hands it over to the orchestra, he releases it. It's not his
Yeah,
anymore.
yeah,
so I can understand also what you're saying now, that it's these two sides that you have, the one control and the other one just releasing it.
Yes, exactly. And I'm not, I don't say that one side is more valid than the other, because it's, you know, writing a piece of music is very personal. And so, of course, you want it to be, if you really want what you wrote there, you think, okay, every time this is performed, it has to be performed this way, because that's a complete representation of me as a composer. And somebody will say, okay, well, you're stupid because you have the horn playing too loud here, or because you put the trumpet in a very low register that it shouldn't be in, or that the different problems of balancing in orchestration or in pacing. I can understand how somebody may come to that, but I personally am more on the side of, well, the performer hopefully will use what I've written as a guide and can add maybe a little bit more to it, because I think that before, in the past, in the 19th century, and before, in the 18th century, in the 17th century, in the 16th century, you didn't have as much notated on the page. Many composers, they started adding more and more as time progressed, but in some of the Baroque pieces, some of the classical pieces, you don't even really have slurs. You don't even really have dynamics. It's just notes on the staff. And that's because the composer thought, well, they know that if it's written like this, it should be slurred, it should be connected. If they know that if it's written like this, then this should happen, or that should happen. And they'll have enough time to have rehearsals that they can also talk to each other. And I will be there and I can tell them directly how it's supposed to go. But now that, since the 20th century, with music becoming more global, and with composers not always being there when it's performed, or even more rarely being there when it's performed, or being long gone when it's performed. It's good to have a lot of details already on the page, but I think that this is still just the starting. I mean, for me personally, for my music, it's the starting point. But I do try to respect the wish of the composer. And when it's Stravinsky, I know that what he wrote on the page is the way that he really wanted to be, and that he didn't want anything added to it. But when it's another composer, well, then you can add maybe dynamics here, or maybe you can add slurs there, or you can try to pace it at the way that you want it to go. It doesn't have to be mechanical. I don't think it should be mechanical either, but I know that he really wanted it to be, in a way, because he thought that if you just play what he wrote, that's expressive enough.
But now, well, you said that as a child you were so inquisitive to all the sounds and all the sounds of the different instruments. Do you think also this helps you when you compose, when you and also when you conduct, that you that you hear these sounds also, that you are sort of in tune to these instruments?
Well, yeah, you have to be. It's a requirement that you have to know all of the different sounds of the orchestra, the different instruments, and you have to know how they relate to each other. You have to know, like when you're balancing a chord between a clarinet and an oboe, how to do so. You have to understand, how the natural tendencies of the instruments work, of the orchestra, and you have to understand, I think that it's a requirement that you know as much as possible, and that you hear as much as possible, to do this, because every instrument, if in a professional orchestra, every instrumentalist in front of you is an expert in their field. So you're walking into a room of experts, and you go and you stand on the podium, and the experts know when you don't know.
Oh, okay.
And so you have to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is this intimidating?
Is
Is it?
I mean, in the beginning, as a young conductor, when you don't know a lot, and you also don't know what you don't know, then but you know that you know this though, that that there are things that you simply don't know. Then it can be intimidating, but the more experience that you have working with orchestras, the more that experience that you have, well, I mean, more knowledge that you have from reading about how the instruments work, from speaking to the experts, the musicians. So I mean, it's just one of those things where you just have to know as much as possible.
Yeah.
The musicians, they're experts on their instruments, and many of them, when you're a young conductor, have been playing in orchestras since before you were born, and so they have also these years of experience in front of you. But the more that experience that you have working with orchestras, the more knowledge that you collect, the less intimidating it becomes. And the more for me personally, when I show up on the podium, I know that I've done my homework, and I'm secure in that. And I know that I've conducted orchestras before, good ones, not as good ones. And so I have all of these experiences that I can draw on, and that I can make the rehearsals work, I can make the concert work. And yeah, I know that. But I also know that there are some conductors, really, really famous ones that you'd know their name. Everybody would know their name, who were so shy, because it's such a personal craft as well, that before the first rehearsal they would be in their dressing room vomiting, because they were
Really?
so nervous about how is this going to go? Will the orchestra like me? Will they not like me? Will I mess up this, or will this go well? Because it's also a thing of being self-critical. And
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, I'm also self-critical, and I can be nervous as well, but at the same time I am very confident in the fact that I will go to the podium prepared, and that this will be enough.
Yeah. Is it also more comfortable, or more, or do you also feel more confident when it's your orchestra, or are you really with any orchestra comfortable? Because some
Well,
people, some conductors, especially with competitions, you are put into, say, for example, an orchestra that you don't know.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, you can you have to read the room that you're walking into. And so if you walk into a room of sharks, then I don't think that anybody is comfortable walking into a room of sharks. I mean, it's happened to me before that I have visited some orchestras where literally everybody is angry, and and this is a guest conducting opportunity that I'm talking about. But it's because they're angry at the situation. Maybe there's some problem with the way that it's being run, or that they're unhappy with their normal conductor, or that they're unhappy with the way past conductors have treated them, or the way something else, or maybe just they have a bad situation in their city, or there are many different things, because it's a collection of people.
Yeah.
And so everybody has their own thing. And so of course in this situation you just have to try to make it, you have to try to make the best of the situation. And in my experience, if you show up and you're prepared and you're serious about the music, then all of these other things go away, because people are drawn into that. They're drawn in because at the end of the day, even though we're all human, we all who sign up to do music do it for a reason. We do it because we love it, we believe in it. And even if we've been doing it for many, many years, and some people become a little jaded over time, it's still in there that the reason why you do music is for music. It's to express something.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, I mean, I feel that as long as you go with this, then you can make any situation into a comfortable situation.
Yeah. Now, Will, tell me, you said now that you started in America, and in school already you had this exposure to orchestra, to all these different instruments. Do you think nowadays it is the case that children have this exposure, or do you think there can be done for children to get this exposure to music and classical music and all these different instruments?
Well, I think for certain, and everywhere in the world, more can be done. I mean, there's never a case where already enough is where this is the end. You can never reach that. But as I said, there are places where you have more that's being done already than in other places. And so, I was very fortunate to have been in a place growing up where the local symphony orchestra would offer this strings program, for free. You didn't have to pay for it. You show up into the classroom, or you sign up for it, and it's a class, and just enough like going to algebra. So you show up and you go to strings classes, what they called it, and you learn how to play a string instrument. And if you couldn't afford to buy one, then you could rent one for $50 a year. $50 a year, you could rent a string instrument from the symphony. And if you couldn't afford that, then you could also have a waiver so that you get an instrument. So, this is something that's really a luxury, I think. And I don't know, I'm sure that there has to be somewhere else that does something similar, but I don't know of anywhere else that does a program like that. And, they'd offer you this opportunity after they've already, they already, would put kids on the school bus to go to the concert hall to hear the orchestra perform. And so, this was a great opportunity, a great exposure that they offered us. And so I feel fortunate for that. And of course, there are other places where there isn't a local symphony orchestra, and where there isn't, really an opportunity to learn how to play music. And so then I think it's incumbent on the nearest symphony orchestra to go to these different places and to play community concerts, or concerts for the community, I should say, for that does not the communities that don't have orchestras. I think that it's really our jobs as musicians to offer this, because if we don't, then people do ask the question, well, why what's the purpose of an orchestra?
Yeah. And it's also about the appreciation of the music, not necessarily that these kids would become musicians, but
Exactly.
that they get the appreciation for the music. And I totally agree with you. I think it's really the responsibility. Well, I think more people can take responsibility, but I think the orchestras can initiate it, because it's sometimes a question of you are there at the forefront, so you have the possibility to do something and to give children the opportunity to see and to hear the music.
Yeah. Well, I think that we as musicians sometimes can be too complacent and believing, well, there's always been a symphony, there's always been an orchestra, there's always been an opera, and that it will always be there. And it won't be if you don't share it with people. And so I think that it's really important that we do that, and that we don't just live in our own worlds, this is, I live in a classical music world, and everybody around me is a classical musician, and I speak to classical musicians, and then all of a sudden the government cuts, funding for the orchestra, and then you wonder why. And sometimes they do it, and then you actually do have to wonder why, because they're doing really fantastic work. But if the orchestra is, having 40% attendance, and they're not, making an effort with the community, then and the politicians haven't really had the opportunity to get to know music as well, because they weren't making an effort. Then
Exactly.
then it for them, I can kind of understand why they would say, well, should we spend money on this? Is it right for them to do it? No, it's not right for them to cut the orchestra, but I can understand where that thought process comes from. And so I think, from that standpoint, that it's very, 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 very incumbent on us, very important for us to, to always make an effort to, make concerts more accessible and more easily to be attended by everybody, and to make it to be as relevant as possible to the communities in which we live. That now, what happens in Vienna is going to be very different than what happens in Berlin, or very different than what happens in Paris, or in Prague, or in New York, or San Francisco, or Tokyo. It has to be tailored for the community that we live in. But I think that we have to think about this. And just to be clear, I'm not speaking poorly of any organization at this moment. I'm talking about the industry as a whole.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I totally agree with you, and I think it's. We're saying Vienna, and we think Vienna. Everybody has the opportunity, but I've actually spoken to a musician who said that when he was in school, he was the only one in his year doing music, doing a music exam. And I found that so shocking to think in a city like Vienna that was possible. I'm talking now about higher, like the higher schools. But so I think we should not think or just assume that everybody has this exposure, so.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, Vienna is a lot better than many other cities in the exposure to classical music. But still, when stories like that happen, then it's clear that there are some, that there are some cracks in the system that need to be addressed. And it's interesting because also now speaking about my American experience, there are some orchestras that I know of where there are some donors that have that support the because in America the arts are mostly supported by private sponsors, whether it be companies or individuals. The state doesn't really do anything. The National Endowment of the Arts, which is what supports all of the arts in the country, including Hollywood, and you can imagine how big the budgets for Hollywood movies are. $150 million. And that sounds like a lot of money. But when you look at it, where one orchestra may have a budget of 50 million, and there are, many, many, many orchestras. And then, one Hollywood picture may have a budget of 300 million, twice as much as the entire, or, a museum may have a budget, an annual budget of, many millions. I mean, or the Metropolitan Opera, 500 million. It's really nothing. And so, they rely on private sponsorships there to carry the arts. And there have been, some donors who say, well, I support the orchestra, not because I like it. I've heard it actually quite a lot, that a few different people saying that they support it, not because they like it, but because they know it's important. That's really great, but you get every generation fewer people saying that. And that's, I think, directly attributed to classical music going further and further out of the spotlight. And so, I think that we have to really make more of an effort, even when we are making a big effort. I think we have to do even more to reach everybody, so that they see, okay, this is what classical music is about. And I was recently at a concert of an orchestra, a European orchestra in Germany, and they gave a family concert, or not an educational concert. They had school children come into the concert hall, and they went into so much detail about the string instrument. Really, people under 10, it was 10 and under, it seemed like. Maybe they were even younger than that, I don't know. But they would say, okay, well, this is the violin, and this is what happens when you pluck. This is called plucking, when you use your fingers, and this is how you tune the instrument, and you use this little small thing, and it's called a mute, and it changes the sound. And they went into so much detail. And normally, you're told don't go into so much detail with the child, because they don't have the ability to really follow it. But I was watching them, and they were following it. They were really into it. And I doubt that many of them are going to walk away knowing everything that they just learned. But if they take away one or two different things from this, then it's already a win.
Yeah.
And too often orchestras will say, well, we'll have this educational concert, and then the principal musicians say, well, this will be my day off. The solo musicians will say, they won't play for that concert, or the principal conductor won't conduct that concert, but will give it to, an assistant or to a guest conductor who isn't really, experienced. And, they won't have a world-class soloist there. But this concert, they had all of these things. They had their full orchestra with the full, the principals, the solo musicians. They had a world-class violinist there. And they had a very fantastic conductor with a big international presence. And I'm sure that had a major impact on those children. And so, this is a story of them doing something correctly. And I think that this is how we all have to do it. We have to treat educational concerts just like it's the big subscription series.
I totally agree with you. And you know what? You were talking about just, the strings and the plucking the strings. And I remember teaching in a school in the UK. And one day I took a violin with, it was just for a sort of an interesting little moment that I, showed the children. And they were probably half of the class have never seen a real violin like that. And I was actually so surprised, because I was thinking, wow, this is, the UK, and you would think some children would have seen an instrument like that. And it was very interesting. But like you say, that's the way to do it, to sort of break it down for them and give them something that can make them inquisitive to go again, or to find out more. And maybe it's that one moment that inspires a child to start playing, or just another child who just have interest in.
Yeah. 100%. It's just exposure.
Exactly.
But I think that it's not only for children. I think for adults too. Yeah, because many adults don't have this exposure. And if you can go, at an eye level, and not talking, I'm the concert hall, and the great orchestra, and so I have to reach out to you and to teach you, I have to educate you. No, but to go and say, this is how what I do works. And people are interested in it. But I know personally, I don't like it when somebody speaks down to me. I immediately shut off. And I know that many people are the same way. And so, even though it may be good in this, we have to make sure that we are speaking at an eye level.
No, that's true. But now, Will, tell me, what are the wishes now for you for the future?
Well, we have coming up on the 11th of March a concert in the Concerthaus, the Nova Orchestra Wien, and we have a fantastic guest soloist coming, Narek Haknazarian, a really fantastic cellist, who's the winner of the 2011 Tchaikovsky competition, a gold medal. And this is one of the major competitions of the world, with a lot of historical significance. And he's, the gold medalist of 2011, and they don't have this competition every year. Well, he's coming to play the Tchaikovsky Rococo variations with us. And the rest of the program will feature a work by a fantastic composer from France, Taillefer, who is not as well known as she should be. But she lived for a very, very long time, most of the 20th century, from the early 20th century until the 1980s. And, she knew all of the great French composers of the 20th century and worked in fantastic circles. And we're performing a work by her, the Small Suite for Orchestra. And we're also performing the First Symphony of Dmitri Shostakovich. This is a work that he wrote for his graduation concert from the old Leningrad Conservatory. And it's a work that's very much influenced by the past, by previous composers, by Wagner, by Beethoven, by Brahms, and it's interesting work. It's already a masterpiece. It went immediately into the standard repertoire. Imagine he was 19 years old when he wrote this, and then all the
Wow.
great conductors and great orchestras said, "Well, we will start performing this." The first two movements are fun and joyous, and funny, and they definitely take inspiration from his time as a pianist, writing, composing, and playing for silent movies. Um,
Oh, okay.
in the 1920s. So
Yeah.
it's that type of kind of silent film music in a way. And then in the third movement, which is almost always the slow movement, here it's also the slow movement. It starts off with beautiful melodies, and then there's a moment where you can hear something happen in his life. Don't know what it was, but something happened that profoundly impacted him, and the piece changes, and he becomes very, very serious. You can think of it as he went from being a boy, a teenager, to a man in this moment. And the rest of the piece, from halfway through the third movement to the end, just really, you can hear this. And the fourth movement, it's like a grand opera within a movement of a symphony. You could think like Beethoven's Ninth, just without the choir. It's just really, there's so much there, so many thoughts, and it's a very inventive work. And then we're also performing, as I mentioned earlier, an early composition of mine. It's called A Confused and Troubled Society. Now, this is from 2010, but I feel like it has a lot of, it feels a lot like a lot of relevance today as well. Yeah, so I think it's an interesting program, and I hope that people will enjoy it.
Amazing. But you are also always, when you talk about your concerts, it's so it sounds so interesting, and how you describe the music. So that's wonderful that you can do that. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I hope that you can come.
Oh, I would love to come. Yeah, that would be great. Yeah. But well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for all this wonderful and also the inspirational words about the education, music education, and your path. And I'm sure it will inspire as well. And it's so great to hear your story, because I think it's also important that people understand that you didn't just arrive there. There's a story behind, and there's a path that you followed, and a lot of hard work, and I'm sure you needed a lot of motivation also to get to where you are.
Yeah, well, certainly, and a lot of hard work, and I think that it is important that people know this.
Yeah.
Many musicians, especially conductors, at some point try to say, "Well, I am the great so and so, and I am just really wonderful at music, and all these things." And it's like, okay, yeah, sure. Even if you were a prodigy when you were very young, you still had to work to become really great.
Exactly.
And and I think that it's important for the audience. I mean, some people, they really buy into the great myth, and they really enjoy this. But I think that when we speak about expanding our audiences, I know in popular music and in popular culture, when people talk about popular, when audience members talk about, or the general public, we could say, talk about popular artists or popular actors, or different things like this, athletes also, who are at this very top level. They first say, wow, they're so incredible at what they do. But then I find that they're even more interested when they say, well, and they said Michael Jordan would never be a basketball player because he was so bad, and he had to work very hard to become one of the greatest of all time, if not the greatest. And the same thing with other actors who weren't able to achieve until they were 30 or 40, losing auditions, or not even being able to take invited to the audition, and all of a sudden they had something. But there's a story of working behind it, and I think it's important when we talk about expanding audiences that people know that we classical musicians are also human, and that we also have these stories behind us.
I totally agree with you, and I think, and this is why it's so important for me to ask these questions and have this program, because I think there are many cases where, and also I think in society now we think everything has to be instant and everything has to happen in about a year or 2 years time. And you, as musicians, you know that it's a long journey and that you start somewhere at a young age, and you know, it takes hours and hours of practice and a lot of education to get to where you are. And I think that's very important that people also understand that.
100%.
Yeah. Well, but have a wonderful afternoon, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. And
Yeah.
it's as always a pleasure to be here and to be speaking with you.
It's so lovely. Yeah, thank you so much. And well, I hope to see you soon
Likewise.
at your concert.
Hopefully, 11th
Yeah.
of March.
Okay.
Concerthouse.
Okay. Okay, well, bye.
Goodbye.